open the Q&A and let me open the chat. Where's that gone? I ain't got a chat box.
Have you not?
I ain't got a chat box. Hang on, what's in this more box? Oh, chat. There we are. Found it. It was under the box called more for some reason.
Perhaps your screen is a little bit smaller. Good morning, guys. Welcome to the session. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. I hope that you're all very well and you've had a good week. We do like to end the week on this session with Gavin, where we can just tune in, have a cup of tea or coffee, whichever is your preference, and listen to a good old chinwag with a fantastic photographer. So this morning we've got Nick Brown. He is known for his absolutely fantastic urbanscape photography within the Guild and took home plenty of awards at the awards dinner this year in February, which seems so far away when life was so normal, whereas it's all a bit crazy now. If you want to pop a hello on, we've already had some from Karen, Leslie and Neil. Good morning, guys. Pop it into the chat and make sure that you select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see that you're there as well. If you've got any questions as we go through, please don't hesitate. Just pop them into the Q&A section and we will keep an eye on it for you and go through the session. I won't waste any more time, guys. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, everyone. And I will hand over to Gavin and Nick.
Morning, everybody, and morning, especially Nick. How the hell are you, mate? Are you well?
Very well, thank you, Gavin. Very well indeed.
Considering your current status as a new dad.
New dad in lockdown. Yes, it's all good fun. It's keeping me on my toes.
So you managed to become a dad before lockdown, did you? Or are you going to go under the brand of whatever the new terminology is for new babies that are born out of lockdown?
She's
during
a lockdown baby, I guess. Yeah, she's 8 weeks, eight and a half weeks.
8.5 weeks.
So far, so good.
Wow. Well, 8.5 weeks, and here's to the next 18 years, mate, when you sat on the stairs saying that skirt's too short, you're not going out wearing that.
I'll let the mum take care of that.
Well, I just want to go back to the first time I met you, to be honest, Nick, when you walked onto the stand at the Guild Awards, and I've got a picture queued up here because everybody will have a picture, and a lot of the people watching something will resonate with themselves. But when you see a picture and it sticks in your mind forever, and it's the most simple photograph in the world, and I'm just going to share my screen here because this picture still sticks in my head from the first time I met you on that fateful day. Can everybody see that? Presume everybody can. That fateful day at the NEC when you walked on, I said, do you have a look at a few of my pictures? And you showed me this. And I can still remember this picture. And just tell me about it, because I'll tell you my thoughts on it after you've spoken about it.
It does make me laugh that you bring that up quite a bit. So that was taken probably about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, when I was doing a 365 project. So I just, I've not been doing photography as I do now for very long. And this was taken after I'd done a online course with the OU and the RPS. And I was just looking at ways to stretch myself. So I did a 365 project. And at this point, I was still trying to actually take a photo a day before it just became too much. And I'd build up a stock of photos and then release them every day. But this was taken quite late in the day when I realised I hadn't actually taken a photo. And that light is actually in our sitting room. And the reason that it didn't have a shade on it is because we had a rather heavy sort of chandelier type lampshade on it, and it pulled the wire out of the ceiling. So I had to take it off. It was just
nicely built, nice quality electrician that fitted it.
Well, no, I just sat scratching the surface of some of the problems we had to deal with when we first moved here. But yeah, that was it. So I saw it and I thought that would do. Just the bulb in the dark.
It's just, I personally, I'm always looking for narratives and storylines and things that draw me into the picture. And it's a picture that I'm sitting here looking at. And I still think I can see something in the shadows, and that's the main appeal of this picture, is the fact that, is there somebody just out? Is there somebody there that we can't actually see? Is the screen broken up? As you know, would it be better in a print? But it's just that negative space is so busy, and that sounds a very bizarre thing to say when you look at what the actual picture is: a light bulb and a dark wall. But the space is so busy, being a space, that it's intriguing, and that's how it affects me, this picture. I just find it absolutely fascinating. It's the one that put you on the map for me. You know, so 360.
It always amazes me you bring it up, because it was just like a fleeting moment of, I just got to take a picture, and that was there. So that became the subject, and I'm pleased you like it.
Well, it's just one of those things, you know. There's certain images that, you know, it's like the IOM. There's certain images I can go back over the time I've been judging it, 4 or 5 years, and I can remember certain pictures for good reasons and for bad reasons, you know. And this is just one of those pictures that I will probably have to twist your arm up your back and scrounge a copy of it on a print, because it needs to go on my wall of rememberable pictures, because it is that it's just there, it's just sunk in, you know.
You've got the file there, Gavin, so help yourself.
Oh, I don't go printing other people's work without written consent. We don't go getting them sort of troubles and wars. But no, so I mean, where did the interest in photography come from? I mean, it's the first question I ask everybody, because I think everybody has a different answer.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's still fairly new in its infancy, in its current form. But I've always had an interest. I'd say the first time I actually made any sort of steps into proper photography, if you like, was probably around 2000. And I bought a Nikon D40, which I think is like an 8 megapixel camera. I was very naive to everything. I didn't realise that you would need a computer. I didn't realise you need software. I didn't realise that you needed filters, tripods, remotes. And I think as that reality set in, it kind of got pushed to a back burner.
Right.
And then it was probably about 4 years ago that I bought another camera. Not that there's anything wrong with the one I had, but I thought a new camera might help me, might motivate me. And again, it was more stuck on auto, just taking a few snapshots. But then it was on my honeymoon that I said, I'm actually going to, when I get home, I'm going to do a course. I'm going to learn how to do this properly. And I signed up for the Royal Photographic Society's Intro into Digital Photography through the OU, which is a 3-month online course. And then on completing that, I was hooked, more so than ever before. I had a better understanding of what I was doing. And from there, it was just looking for the inspiration. And that's what led on ultimately to the 365 project, purely just to stretch myself, put a bit of pressure on myself to find pictures and images. And that was really, it was hard going, because you do have to remember to do it every day, which I did slip on a few times.
A 365 project is a phenomenal project. I mean, it's like, you know, one of our friends, Claire just did a 365 self-portrait challenge, and I can imagine that was just epic to do. You know, what a phenomenal thing. So I can, you know, just taking 365 photographs a year. Does anybody ever do it in a leap year, so they have to take one less?
Yeah, adjust it. There was some real rubbish in there. Don't get me wrong, but it helped. It helped with seeing and being able to spot something, and I think that's probably where the start of the architecture thing came along, because you tend to just gravitate to what's in your environment. And the easiest thing for me to do was to take pictures of what was around me and what was easiest. So that became street photography. And then if there was nothing on the street, then the nearest thing next to the street is a building.
I'm just going to, this will put random pictures up. Oh, this one looks like, I was going to say this, I couldn't help it. This one looks a little bit pixelated.
Just a touch. Yeah, that's actually one of the images that I used in my Q panel. That's a Holiday Inn in Birmingham, and it's just quite striking. It is black and white, although the image is black and white, but in reality it's black and white, and it just catches my eye. This, like you say, it looks a bit, the pixelated design of it.
I couldn't resist it, to be honest. It was such an easy pun, that one, to drop in.
I look at it now and it drives me insane, though, because I think where a lot of the work that I've produced has been a result of experimenting and learning how to do things. And I spot things now and here, like I can see the lines aren't straight.
You can see the lines aren't straight. You're talking to a Virgo with massive amounts of OCD, but I can live with that. You know, I just want to...
Probably one of the earliest ones in architecture, and then there's another one in there from that same panel. That's the one.
I don't know if do you want me to try and find it on a... Which one
it was
is
that,
it?
It was that one you
see?
had, Gavin.
Oh, that one here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is pretty typical of what I was doing. I had to use my time as best I could, and obviously working full time. A lot of the photographs I took were taken around work. So I spent a lot of time in London, and that's a university building not too far from Euston Station. So it's just a case of killing a bit of time before I jumped on the train, making a bit of time for myself. And I saw a bit later on, I saw a similar image of this same building that was either shortlisted or won Urban View in the Landscape Photographer of the Year. And I think it was at that point I thought, well, actually, there is some value in the architectural photography. It kind of validated for me taking pictures of the buildings. But even at this point, I wasn't happy with the image. It wasn't what I was really going for, but I was probably limited in my own ability when it came to editing and what I wanted to create. And I think in comparison now, I look at these images, and I do still like them, but I think they're quite flat compared to what I've been able to pull together.
I think it's a really good point, actually, you know, when you look back at your early work, for not just yourself, but for all of us as photographers. And when, you know, from that point, when you first started shooting to where you are now, you can see actually a progression. Hopefully you can see a progression, and then you can actually see a development of style as well, because that's something that's become quite evident in your work.
Yeah, it's definitely come forward, and I think the way I process an image now isn't unique to me. I think it's unique to the guild environment, but there's plenty of people that have a similar technique, albeit with their own twist on it. But these are quite high key, and I wanted like the lower key, the darker images, because there's more drama in that. And it's difficult taking a picture of a building. You're effectively taking a picture of somebody else's work, but then it's portraying that in a way that is your own, and just making it look.
Well, that's just different. Artistic license. That's your artistic license. I mean, it's just like photographing people. Everybody photographs people in different ways. But you know, as an artist, you're putting your interpretation on that and just using the buildings as a subject. You know, it's there's nothing wrong with that at all. Did you take any inspiration from anybody then in the early stages?
I haven't really. Not many people actually, and there's no reason for that. I think it's just because when I'm looking at images, I flick through, keep going, and don't really take note of any names. But there is a Greek lady called Julia Gospodorio. I probably haven't pronounced that surname correctly, but her images are quite amazing. And I think when I first saw some of her work, I was like, that's where I want to take it. That's where I want to try and get to. Not copy it, but I didn't have a clue how these images are being produced. And I think that's when I started looking at the tools available to me to process images. And through learning those techniques, I've started to develop my own way of doing things, which is different. So that's probably the only inspiration. I think ultimately the photos I take are for me. There's some there that I absolutely love that haven't gone down well that I still enjoy.
There's always going to be those.
Yeah, and as much as you love to do well in IOM, it's not the be all and end all, but it's
you're dead right there.
IOM has really brought me on as well. Just having that competition and those targets to aim for.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm just doing a video on on competition and entering competitions, and whether or not some people learn from it. I'm with you in the camp that it brought my photography on a long way, but I know I totally realise competition isn't for everybody. And then sometimes you just put one in to make up the numbers, and it ends up doing well, and the others that you thought were going to do well, it's just how it is,
Yeah.
But no, competition is definitely has been a good thing. And I was talking to Henry last week, and Henry agreed it was for him as well, but I know it's not everybody's psyche.
I think with IOM, because in its unique nature, because it is based on consistency through the year, it means you have to keep producing the images, and then through producing those images, I personally have got better at seeing and then processing. So it's brought me on leaps and bounds, really.
I mean, you look at your first image and look at this image. I mean, I remember this when it first popped up on my screen when I was judging it, and I just thought, my God. I'm not jealous of anybody who took that. Well, who took that? I need to find out. And then obviously found out it was you, and I was like, oh, wicked. You've come on such a long way in this period of time, since you've, not because of the guild, because you've obviously been dedicated and you want to learn yourself, which is passion again, which drives you forward, But this has definitely got your name written all over it, this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favourites. I think I always wanted, I've been to Canary Wharf loads to take photos, and that was always a building that I wanted to capture and do something with. But when you go to Canary Wharf, everything's on top of you, and it's not easy finding the vantage point, and it's right there in front of you. You can't miss it. I just hadn't been down this particular road. But when I was able to grab that, I was really, really happy. I actually went to Canary Wharf when I was probably about 15, when that was the only skyscraper. So I was pleased to be able to take that, because it was just one that I wanted.
I think we might have we before and after in here of this one? I don't know if it'll come up next.
Yeah.
Yes, we have there. So this is gonna surprise many people. I think. So this
I don't
is
think anyone really thought that came out of the camera, but it was. Yeah, I think it was Mark Lynham that said it was. The raw is just part of the ingredients to that picture, and that was it. That's the starting point there for me. You can't see it in that image because it wasn't happening at the time, but the sun was hitting the roof of the building, and at that point I thought, right, that's how I want to edit it. I want to have the emphasis on the top of that building and then coming down the front. So the end image isn't representative of what I was seeing, but I knew immediately what I wanted to do with that, and I only took 2 frames. The first one I took, the building was probably a little bit hidden by the building on the right, so I had to get into the road. But it's quite tricky because the security around Canary Wharf is really good, and they don't really take too kind to people pointing cameras around.
Even when you're pointing it at just the building and not the doorways, just pointing it at the building, and they still come and have a go at you, will they?
No, I think in my head, I think you get warnings. I mean, once they spotted you twice, then they'd ask you to move along. Especially if you've got tripods, they don't like tripods.
Did you shoot this handheld then, or is it a tripod-based image?
This is a lot of the photographs are handheld. And that's because I do use filters and tripods, but these are taken in the week. So I'm at work and I'm already taking laptops and folders down to London in a bag. Squeeze my camera in there as well, and a rather chunky lens. It wasn't really an option then to have a tripod as well and filters. So that's why there's a mix of skies as well. I mean, sometimes the sky is natural, Sometimes I've manipulated the natural sky with some blur, and other times I've actually just painted one in, created it myself.
I think some people, you know, I mean, for me, what you're doing is, as I think you said, was it Mark you mentioned, you know, a camera records the raw data for you, literally, excuse the raw pun, but, you know, it is a data collector for you to go back with then and use your artistic tools to create what you've got in your head, you know. I know there's always the argument of the sort of one purist photographer, for want of a better way of describing it, and people say, well, it should be captured in camera, but nothing's ever pure. Even film photography isn't pure, you know.
No, certainly not. Yeah. And I mean, you're just using the tools that, I mean, if we never took on board the tools that are now available to us, we'd all still be there with focus hoods and wet plates, wouldn't we? That's
we'd have to have a tripod then, wouldn't we?
Yeah. But I get it. I do understand. I do understand it. But when you're photographing buildings, you're at the mercy of the weather as well, and sometimes there is nothing in the sky. Sometimes you can't even see the building through fog. And I mean, so many times I've turned up somewhere to take photos, the weather's let me down, or there's some scaffolding up. So you kind of just have to take your chances, really. This was my first gold. I was really happy with this, actually. I remember I was in a meeting at work. It had actually ended, but the participants had flown down from Scotland, and we were sort of idling away time quite badly, and everyone had run out of conversation. So I thought, just check the IOM results. I thought I got a gold, and I almost fell off my chair. I think
do the happy dance around the boardroom, did you?
I think they could see my sudden change in excitement and wonder what was going on. But yeah, I mean, there's so many shots out there that are sort of go-to architectural shots, and this bridge at Crossrail and Canada Square is quite commonly seen. So when I went down there, I wanted to just add a bit of life to it. So there's a rather slight, there might be like a 1 or 2 second exposure on that, just to capture that movement. But then I noticed that, take a step back, and there was this frame to the station that was nicely framing that bridge, which is the 3 upright, well, 3 sort of diagonals you can see there. That's what I wanted that image to be, and just attempt to make my own mark on a probably overtaken shot.
It's just got a huge amount of impact. I mean, I remember I know what it's like, what you mentioned when you first get your first goal. It is quite a momentous personal occasion, because I remember exactly when I got my first one, and then you just think, oh, you know, I wonder what this is all about, and then you get one and you think, wow, you know, it just gives you a very warm feeling inside, doesn't it? And it's justifiably so in this one as well.
Yeah, you know, it was completely unexpected, and I don't think my standard wasn't there up to that point. It was classifieds and bronzes and a few that didn't score. So to suddenly have a gold, I was like, this isn't right. They've got something wrong here. I'll wait for it to pop up on the website.
What do them judges know about anything? I think we've got a before and after of this as well, haven't we? Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, this is a rescued image, really. And I know we spoke the other day, I referenced Lynn Harper saying she doesn't like to rescue images, but this one really did need it. It was the framing's off completely. There's a lot of wasted space at the bottom of that, but it was on a tripod, and this was one of the occasions when there were some security milling around, and I was using a tripod. So I thought, it's only a matter of time before I'm asked to move along. So I just quickly took that final frame, people where I wanted them. So there wasn't really much option in the cropping of that photo. It had to be like a 16:9.
Mm. Is that one of your favourite formats, 16:9? It's one of mine.
It was for a long while. I've gone more to 8:10, 12:10 now. I think that's probably for ease of printing. But that's naturally the shape of that picture. It's a wide walkway. It just seemed to well, my options were limited. I couldn't crop it in another way and get the entire walkway in there and the frame of the diagonals there.
Is that, are you back against the wall? Is that the maximum you can get in? Are you actually up against a or a railing or something like
more room
that?
behind me. I could have adjusted the tripod, but again, I was conscious of the fact that I probably had run out of time, so I thought I'll do it. And then I had a look in the camera after. I thought I can make that work.
So you've one eye going through the viewfinder and one eye on high-vis jackets.
Yeah, very much so.
I mean, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Street photography. Well, not a funny thing. It's there's. I've seen interviews with very confrontational street photographers who I can't remember one of them's name. It was mentioned this morning in something I was watching. Excuse me, who's a photographer who goes around with a flash and points it in strangers' faces and fires the flash straight into the face to do his street portraits. I mean, there's the real confrontational side of it, and then you get your photographers who don't actually want to be noticed with the small cameras, lenses, or sit in the shadows and this sort of thing. But when I first came across the confrontational street photographers, I thought, well, this isn't very nice. You're going to get into trouble doing that. That's not very personal to people, or being thinking about other people's feelings and emotions and things. But
especially in the world we live in today, it's not for everyone, is it? Nobody really wants to be photographed with a huge lens. When I'm out and about, I usually have a 35mm on the front of the camera, so I can't really shoot from a distance. And I've noticed I don't really do a great deal of street photography anymore, though I still love it. I can see that from when I started doing it to when I do it now, faces aren't really present anymore. I'm looking for other images, probably because the older I've got and the more sensible I've become, I don't want to take those risks. But you can have, a lot of people are quite willing. You can just acknowledge them, even with a facial gesture, and they're quite happy. And other people will probably clearly let you know if they don't want their photo taken. But yeah, it's definitely for the brave or the stupid.
Have you ever deleted a picture? Have you been asked to delete a picture and got rid of it?
No, I haven't actually. I haven't really found myself in any sort of spot of bother really. So I've been fortunate. I think it's a case of probably had the best of the luck. Leave it there.
I had a good tip this morning from this guy who was doing this interview, in the fact that what they base their line of thought on, if a person is only small in the frame, then it doesn't really matter that they need to go and have a word with them and say, do you mind, I've just taken your photograph. But if they're the prominent part of the picture, then they will probably go and introduce themselves and say, look, I've just taken this picture, are you happy? And go and have that sort of discussion with the people in it, and say it's usually fine once you approach them. And I think it's how you approach people. I mean, obviously I'm living in the north and everybody speaks to everybody, where you live in the south and nobody speaks to each other. There's a little bit of difference, I think.
There's some street photographers around Birmingham, and you can easily tell if someone's taken a photograph with like a 400mm lens or with a 35mm. And I mean, if people are bold enough and got the confidence to have those conversations and manipulate what's going on, then they can get some really good photos. There's a really good video by Joel Meyerowitz on YouTube, and it shows how he goes about street photography, and he talks about how he uses his body to shepherd people into certain positions to get a photo. So he's already selected his background and what he wants, where he wants the person. He's then just waiting for the right person to walk down the street, and he'll sort of shepherd them in without them knowing to get them into frame.
Oh, that's quite clever. We'll have to see if we can find that, and Becky can put a link up, because that sounds quite interesting. Almost herding people around to get them into your pictures. I mean, lots of street photography, the fine art shadow highlights, I'd like to call it, where you will get a lot of angles and a person in the corner and this sort of thing. I think that's just a very patient game, plus maybe a little bit of trickery afterwards, just to emphasize a few things, or even put a direct shadow line in. But it's patience, isn't it? Waiting for that one person. I mean, I remember waiting one day in the rain in Hull, And no, I'm not a street photographer by any means, but I just thought I'll go and try it, and did get confronted by a high vis wearing person. But I was stood outside the Dry as a Bone shop, or Dry as a Bone shop, waiting in the rain, waiting for somebody to walk past with an umbrella and under the sign, because it just made the picture for me. And I got soaked waiting for somebody with a brolly to come past. But for me, I thought it was quite, it's the storyline, isn't it? The humour in it as well. I mean, do you find, humour is something different? Well, I suppose you could build it into architecture somehow.
Yeah, I think that's where the architecture needs to go somewhere different now. And I am thinking about incorporating more people and a bit of life into the images. Because if there's one thing these images lack, it's eyeballs. There's no life in them. I think I'm going to, over the next sort of year or two, I've got an opportunity to change that and have a real rethink in sort of the direction I want it to go in, and putting some life and some meaning into those buildings. Because buildings are our habitats, really. These are places where we live, we work, we play, we worship. They are our environments, and they should have life in them, these images. But over the last year, it has just been this sort of fine art approach.
It's all shape, isn't it? At the minute, you're all about shape and texture.
Yeah, and this image, it's, I mean, the notable building there is the Shard in the background, but it's the handrail on what's called the Scoop, just outside the Mayor's office in London. But that was what I wanted the emphasis to be on. It's, again, it was quite experimental, this one. As I recall, I think it picked up a bronze, so I was very happy with it in the end. It was a really hard day. It was a bright day, and there were some hard shadows on the floor, which I've had to try and, I can't remember if I cropped them out or used a clone. But yeah, the minute I took it, I was thinking that handrail is going to be the emphasis. And it does carry on off to the right-hand side of the page above it, but I didn't want to include that. It was just that arc that interested me.
So what sort of timescales involved? Excuse me, I've got a really tickly throat at the minute. What sort of timescales involved in producing a piece like this?
When I did that, it's quite lengthy because I wasn't doing it the right way. I say, you say yourself, there's 101 ways to do things in Photoshop, and it has been experimental, but the more that I've watched online tutorials to work out how to do things, I found more efficient ways to edit. I can't remember how long that one took. I remember it was a painful one, just to make sure there was sort of no bleeding around that handrail. There isn't a great deal. They're heavily processed, obviously, you can't deny that, but there isn't a great deal of editing now that takes place. I think I'm working in layers,
isn't it?
and I think I can usually get to the end piece in 2 or 3 layers.
Oh wow!
I have to spend quite a bit of time on halos around the edge of buildings. You'll always get like a white line, so that sometimes needs some attention. The Shard, I've never been able to produce an image of the Shard because it's so complex at the top that it's just a nightmare to try to process in the way that I do it. So you'll probably see more of that when I switch to more colour work. But yeah, it's one building I've always wanted to be able to take. It's a landmark. I've never been able to successfully do it, so I've given up for the time being on that one.
Is it? Do you use I mean, I've seen a few tutorials on architecture photographers, and it's all, hundreds on, maybe not hundreds, but certainly a fair few selections they make with the pen tool, and then start dropping gradient filters on them they like to, the ones I've watched, they like to go out and shoot in really flat days, so they don't have any real contrast, and then they can decide where they want the sun to come out, so to speak, when they start editing and completely redesign the light on the image with selections and shadows and separating them all off. Are you very proficient with the pen tool? Because that's a bit of a workabout to learn, isn't it?
Wacom was the best purchase I made. You'd be surprised at how long I was doing it with the pad on the laptop. It was getting to the point where I couldn't move my fingers. So I think I need to preserve the laptop and also help, preserve these fingers as well. I like that. I like when people make that light and dictate where that light falls on a building. I haven't really gone down that path because I see a lot of that. It's not that I don't like it. It's that I've tried to have and then that pops up. I've tried to have my own sort of take on it. Again, this is another well overtaken sort of bucket list shot that most people will go and find. It's actually taken from a shopping centre across the road from St Paul's, obviously, and you get the reflection in the glass on both sides of this shopping centre. But I wanted that for the collection, but I wanted to have my own stamp on it, because otherwise it was just the same as every other image that you see of St Paul's from that vantage.
Is there any way you'd want to go specifically for the architecture? I mean, I know a few photographers that loved going to Berlin, because Berlin's got some fantastic architecture. Barcelona's been. I mean, obviously New York must have umpteen possibilities. So is there anywhere on your bucket list to go visit with your camera?
No, yes, most definitely. I was actually in Berlin last September, but it was for a stag do. So,
you'd have seen a lot of the floor then.
The sky. I did take a camera though, and amazingly, I went out one morning whilst other people were recovering, and by the time I got back to the hotel, I'd actually covered 13 miles. I'd walked a half marathon.
That's not a bad little jaunt in the morning.
The worst thing about it is I had about 3 photos to show for it. So it wasn't the best use of my time. But yeah, there's definitely some places I'd like to go. Rotterdam's very well known for its architecture. Some of the grand cities, Chicago, somewhere I'd love to go to. I think the beauty of architecture is you don't really have to go to these places. It's all around us. You just need to spot where the photo is, or find a part of a building that you can make a focal point for the image.
It's always evolving as well around us, isn't it? With grants and government schemes, we're getting a lot of building going on in the little town I live in, here in Hornsey. We've got a big brand new leisure centre and things like that, which may lend itself to a picture and things, but it's always evolving.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite editing technique or a favourite? I mean, obviously your Wacom tablet is your favourite tool. Couldn't agree more. I don't think I could exist without one, now. So do you have a favourite editing technique and maybe a favourite bit of kit? Do you have anything that you will go out religiously with?
I keep it very simple. As I say, a lot of these images were taken whilst I was at work, so that would always be the camera body, which is mirrorless, so there's no size there. 35mm lens, that's a Sigma Art, so it's quite a hefty lens.
Yeah, I've got one of them. They are quite a chunky thing. Yeah,
they're lovely, but it's so when I'm already carrying around laptops and files and what have you, it was the limit. So that's all I could ever really take out. In terms of the editing, yeah, the Wacom changed everything for me, because there's a lot of, there's always things that need to go. On a lot of buildings, you'll see cranes in the background. You'll see the cranes that are there for cleaning windows. There's always sensor spots. So that was a great purchase. In terms of the editing techniques, I try again to keep it simple, because you can just lose a lot of time in front of a computer.
That's quite therapeutic. That's all part of the creative psyche, isn't it? So that create, whether you're using a computer or you're painting with a brush or drawing with a pencil. That creativity is well. Obviously, now you're a new dad, then time's going to be a little bit different for you. But I just love you can lose yourself in an edit, quite easily.
What I find quite frustrating is when you spend hours and hours and hours working on something, and you take a look at it, and then no, hasn't worked, and put it in the bin. That was 2 days well spent. But yeah, a lot of the time I'm just masking with a feathered brush, and sort of dropping the brightness within reasonable limits. As I said earlier, the skies sometimes in this image here, that's been produced with just simple a grey feathered brush, some path blur on that one, then sort of adjusting the opacity to make sure it fits. But I try to keep it simple, and a lot of the time is spent just polishing the edges, just to make sure that there's no sort of artifacts or errors in there that the eagle-eyed judges will pick up on.
When do you know how to stop is a good question, because you can quite easily
so many times
go over the edge of processing. It's a lot of photographers trip up on that one. Myself, I've over edited images and looked at it and thought you should have stopped about an hour ago on that, because now you've ruined it.
Yeah, it always reminds me when I was a kid, I used to build Lego houses, and you sort of build a house.
You used to build skyscrapers.
It just looks awful now.
I used to love Lego.
I still do. Oh God.
Yeah. You've got a really good excuse to get it all out again now.
But yeah, there's definitely been times when I thought I should have stopped this a long while back, and at that point,
is that when you've had?
I mean, again, this was learning how to use Photoshop. In the early days, I wasn't particularly great at using layers, and everything I was doing was still, it wasn't non-destructive. So now I can sort of easily go back and go, right, I'll take it back to that point. But in the early days, yeah, sometimes it was just...
Knowing when to stop with Lego is when you've got to put a door in it to get out. Dear, what have we got now? We've got another. What is this? St. Paul's again?
That's St. Paul's again. This is a copy of years ago. So I spent a lot of time going to London for work, and to be honest, I'm not a great fan of the city. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. There's a lot of grumpy people that don't want to be there. You're always in someone's way, and it's not, for such a fantastic city, it's not a particularly nice place to be in the week. But years ago, I took a picture from this part of the road. I think this is probably about a quarter of a mile away from St. Paul's. I took it on an iPhone, and I actually loved the image, and I wanted to do it again, but with how I process pictures now. So yeah, it's a simple one, but this is another good example of where other factors can ruin that shot. Because on the right hand side, in front of that tower, there's actually some scaffolding and some sort of tarpaulin covering and obstructing the view. So I've had to bring the shadows across to conceal that, but it's not really the image I wanted. But it was a case of I've got to. It was a rare opportunity to take it. I'll have to make do with that building work going on. Prepare
for the unexpected, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done weddings and gone to the church a couple of days before to check it's okay. When you get there on the Saturday, the scaffolded it on Friday night on the way home, and you're like, oh, right, okay. It's just preparing for that. So you're a Sony shooter now, are you? Are you Sony? Or are you Fuji?
Sony.
Yeah. What made you? Did you make the switch from DSLR to mirrorless?
I was using a Canon 80D, which is a crop sensor, and it's a fantastic camera. It was brilliant. But I wanted to switch to full frame, and I was waiting for a long time for the 16 Mark II to come out, and when it did, it just didn't really hit the mark. There was a few things that I just wasn't happy with. I think the frames per second was quite low, and I was doing the odd sort of bit of sports photography as well at the time. So I needed to find a camera that could sort of fit most situations. It also had the crop sensor focus system on full frame, so you had the focus points sort of bunched together in the middle, and I just found it a little bit frustrating. So I was in Jessops, and the salesman, very good salesman, sort of ran me through.
Obviously.
Yeah, it doesn't take much of a salesman to convince me. So I switched
Go
to
buy a
Sony.
car today then.
So this is, I went down to Stratford in London just to take a few pictures of the buildings in the Olympic Park. There's some really interesting designs there. And this is just, I think this is an apartment block outside the station. There's just something about it that looked a bit daunting, a bit sort of, don't know, like an alien invader type thing. It's got that gap in the front that looks like it could be some sort
It
of.
reminds me of.
It struck me.
Reminds me of the top of the Imperial War Museum in Manchester, because that's when you look at that. I mean, I really should have said I tried this and obviously failed miserably, but that's got a curve with a square thing with a slot in it that glows red. So it just looks like the eye out of some sort of War of the Worlds sort of spacecraft or something like that. You know, a very surreal looking thing.
Yeah. I found it a little bit menacing. So I thought I'd just take it for the sake of walking past it. I'd only get home and kick myself if I didn't. Again, this is
it's quite military based looking, isn't it? This with that slot. You know, it's like the old fortifications on the.
I used to get on the coast.
On the Normandy beaches and things like that. Yeah.
So I didn't. That's the I don't think you can really tell on Zoom so much, but that's natural cloud behind it. I haven't bothered doing anything there. I've just dropped the brightness.
I think before and after of this, I think, haven't we?
Yeah, it's not vastly different, but it gives you an idea. When I've had to. It's just there, you know. It's not. You can just walk past and take a quick shot. There's no difficulty in the actual photography aspect of it, but it's just making sure that you straighten those lines. And I think when I applied the crop, the cranes were still evident, so they had to go. But there's no real challenge in just losing.
If we go from there to there, what an absolute transformation that is. You know, it really is just, you know, that's your vision. You thought, well, I've got a stripe going that way, and if I put a light band going, did you know when you shot the previous picture, this one, exactly where you would go with it when you got home to edit it?
No, because I didn't go for that building at all. It was just like a bit of a bonus, if you like, and it was only when I was hunting around whilst putting together a panel, I thought that one's actually going to fit in quite nicely. And as soon as I put the crop in and I sort of looked at where I was going to put it in that panel, I kind of knew where I needed to emphasize the highlights just to match that. So it's being edited for a purpose.
So you shot this purely to put on the left-hand side of your panel? So it's
no, it wasn't even for the panel. I was looking for something in my sort of banks of images that would fit in the panel. What that will work, and then the highlight was just to complement the images around it.
I think this will inspire.
It may not work yet. You may turn around and go, "That's useless."
Might do, but doubt it. I could ask a question, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? But that's not from me or aimed at me, by the way. It's just a question I've got down here. What is the best what is the best piece of advice you've been given? Is there been a piece? Has there been a piece?
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice that I've been given and I'll pass on is just to always look behind you. Always look down side streets, especially if you're in a city, big city. You just don't know what's going to be around you. I think whenever you're walking around, you just look forward. You turn around, there could be a completely different view of something.
And you mean from a point of view of there might be a building you miss, not somebody in a high-vis jacket sneaking up behind you.
Yeah, always got to have eyes in the back of your head. But no, you just might have missed a building that existed, or a side street can nicely frame a building as well that you just don't know is there. You can walk past so many side streets and just ignore what's down them. There was, I don't think it's in there, but it was an image I submitted in January that was taken when I did the picture of St Paul's, and I literally just looked over my left shoulder and saw this building, and it's just completely out of the blue.
Is this your Founders Cup panel?
No. I did this off the back of Founders Cup because something I liked having those groups of free images. So it's a lot of my time is spent in the city, so it was buildings around me. So you've got the Gherkin there, Tower 42 and Lloyd's of London. And I wanted to do something different and just sort of isolate the vertical aspect of the design on these buildings.
I mean, it works so
it was
well,
always going to be a set of three. There weren't individual images.
Yeah, it works so well as sort of a triptych panel, doesn't it? All the length and height and shape and everything. It's, you know, when you see them actually side by side, you really get a, you know, you can just see that on somebody's wall quite easy. Did you sell your print? Do you even print your prints? Do you print many of your pictures?
No, not as much as I'd like to. And no, I don't sell them either. I'd love to print more, but there's not many places in the house where I can keep hanging black and white pictures of architecture.
So why don't you sell your prints then?
Do you know what? I've toyed with the idea. I probably don't really know where the market exists for them, and then it's finding the time to market them as well, because that's the difference, isn't it, between an amateur and a professional? It's someone that can sell, and someone that doesn't.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, because there's photographers who have got a creative vision and they can't sell a print, and there's people who are, let's say, middle of the road photographers who can sell everyone they shoot, and that's the difference between a business photographer and a creative photographer. I mean, creative photographers do, in my opinion, struggle. And they obviously
that's their only attribute, salespeople. There's some obviously extremely talented people out there, but they've got the ability to market themselves as they need to.
I mean, I could see this stuff selling like bloody hotcakes, to be honest. You know, you can see it on posh hotel walls and gallery walls, and, you know, and people's personal walls, where they live. I could see. I mean, I think we'll be having a chat after this, and you'll be sending some my way. Of course, I will pay as well. I like to pay.
The price is going up as you talk, Gavin.
Well, I'm from Yorkshire, so don't push it too hard, mate.
I'll end up paying you.
No, I think this is your Founders Cup entry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, it says, oh yeah. I mean, this is where you first appeared, and that one in the middle just looks like one of those spaceships from Star Wars to me.
That's the National Theatre on South Bank. Which I love it. I don't really have favourite architects or favourite buildings. I think the rate at which buildings are going up at the moment, they're all much of a muchness. But then you'll see this, which is obviously like the brutalist style, and it's just interesting. It's a massive concrete. There's a lot of texture in there, and you know, it's quite remarkable how versatile that material is and what people have been able to build with it. But when I was piecing this together, I wanted the panel to have architecture from different eras in there. So you've got like the Baroque church from Whitley Court, which is sort of in the Midlands somewhere, I forget exactly where. Then you've got more of a, I don't know the day, it was probably like a 60s, 70s in the middle, and then the modern tower at One Canada Square. And also just looking for that symmetry, really, to have sort of two sort of nice standing tall towers, and then something quite symmetrical in the middle. So
is symmetry something you purposely look for?
No,
one of your go-to.
You just seem to need it because there's geometry in these images, and it was a panel of three, so they needed to talk and sit well together. It was. I found this cut very last minute. I didn't really have much of an awareness, and I think because I wasn't not a great user of Facebook really, and then I suddenly saw all these notices going up around deadlines. I thought actually I'll be able to model three together. I'll be honest. I mean, when I knew I was shortlisted, so I knew there was a chance I might win it. But when I got to Crewe Hall and had to start having a flick through the book, and I saw how many finalists there were and the standard of the work, I wrote it off. So when my name was called out, I was absolutely dumbstruck, genuinely. Couldn't believe it.
Your name got called out several times, didn't it?
I I know. I still can't get my head around that. I owe a lot to one particular image, though. One served me really well. But I think the Founders Cup was my favourite, to be honest, because the other awards came out of purely by virtue of entering IOM. Founders Cup is something I went out of my way to enter, which is not something I've ever done before. So that was a conscious decision. When I went into IOM in 2019, once I figured out the rules, I remember saying to Sarah, my wife, I reckon I could get a bar. And I set out for 2019 with the sole purpose of getting a bar in the open category. And then rather foolishly, in the February, I entered 3 in the natural world that scored quite well. And I was like, crikey, I'm going to have to see that through now as well. So doing 2 categories, I found very demanding. How people do more than that, and I think Anne is doing 5 this year. I don't know whether you find that time, and but then I'm processing a lot more in these images. So if people are going to get these images out of camera and keep their editing times down, it may be easier. But hats off to them.
Do you find it a nice focus away from architecture? I mean, you're obviously not bored of architecture yet, but I'm not saying you will be either. But do you find that digressing into the natural world is a nice way of refocusing yourself?
I'd love to be able to spend more time doing landscape photography. Obviously, the times of the day at which that takes place isn't particularly favourable. But yeah, again, it probably links in with the fact that the architecture is there as our habitat, but then so is the natural world, and it's like a reflection of where we are. And there's an image in there which I'm so happy with, because it picks up the runner-up in the flora and fauna category. That's obviously the before of the church.
Church, yeah.
Had some decent cloud that day, so I was able to use that, and it was just a case of getting rid of some of the bits and pieces around the door. But this is when it started.
There was a sign that's red, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, you can see there's daisies on the floor, and they were standing out like a sore thumb. So I'm thinking, now I've got to get rid of all of these daisies. And
one at a time.
Am I losing my mind here? Is that really going to get pulled up? But I think
you're just going to think, is that a dust spot or a hot pixel or something like that?
Yeah, so I ended up sorting out their borders.
You can't beat doing a bit of landscape gardening with Photoshop, can you? So, I mean, obviously, this is a fantastic building, isn't it? I was just going to say, digressing into your landscape photography, being in your current situation. So, do you think you're going to be touting for the newborn category cup this year?
No way. Those guys earn their money. Blair Elliott very, very kindly talked me through some posing when Nancy was probably about two weeks old, and that's hard work.
Believe me, I've tried it. Yeah.
And
I did my cap to the newborn photographers. I really do, and the dog photographers for that matter.
I know they take a great deal of reward from it, and they love it. But I think you've got to be a certain type of person to have those patience, and also courage to an extent. I mean, I was posing my own baby, and I was nervous around that. So posing other people's is well done.
Yeah, it's a tough one, that one.
This is where I'm starting to dabble with trying to keep the images as edit free as possible, but still trying to find those vantage points. That's, people probably recognise that, Selfridges in Birmingham.
I've never seen it with my eye. I think, maybe seen it from the side of a motorway, I think, or whatever. But I've never been up close to it. But it is a very, very striking piece of architecture. This one, it's very recognisable. That
image is flipped 90 degrees because I'd spotted it. I was thinking, it actually just looks like waves.
Or sand.
So that's why I took that one. I'm not sure where that's going to go long term. That's not going to find its way into IOM. At the moment, it's just a bit experimental. But what I want to see a bit more colour, which is probably not what you'd like to hear. But I can start to get the images out of the camera as quickly as possible and onto the final piece, and then I'll be happy.
Are you going to diversify into the colour world then?
I've always taken colour images. I just had this focus on the black and white. That the intensity of that, the volume of that is going to become less and less. I think over the next few years, I'm going to have a good think about what I want to do with photography. Obviously want to keep developing and learning. There's loads I know that I can focus on and develop skills in. So that's going to be my main project going forward. I don't at the moment know what it looks like, but I've got good excuse to step back and have a think.
Well, that's one of the pluses for me and for a lot of people is that the fact that you are constantly learning about photography, not just because technology is moving on so fast and so strongly, is the fact that there's always something new to learn, and that's something new that you learn can sometimes deflect you down a different path because you think, well, actually, if I did this with this, I might end up with that. So it's one of this. There's always that growth for everybody. Should you want to take that path, and I think diversifying keeps you fresh as well. I mean, I've said it on several times on here.
I mean, the possibilities are absolutely endless, and you'll get out of it what you put into it, won't you? I came across a guy the other day that's has his ARPS with the Royal Photographic Society, and the panel was taken completely on a mobile phone.
I've heard somebody, I can't remember somebody's name, but somebody did a fellowship panel with a mobile phone, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's just we can all strive for this gear, that gear, whatever, but at the end of the day, and it's a famous statement, and I can't remember who made it, is that the best camera you've got is the one that you've got in your hand.
So this is the National Theatre again, and it's just the geometry of it and the texture, and I quite like the muted tones. But again, it's just experimenting at the moment to see what else I can do on the architectural front. It's a bit more representative of the building as well, rather than the heavy edit.
You're going down more a purist architecture route sort of thing, aren't you, with these?
Yeah, I think the other beauty of architecture is you can flip the images and do what you want with them. Especially take it from, if there's nothing indicating the right way up, you've got an open book really. This is my runner-up in the Flora Inset category at the awards. So I was really happy. Again, it's probably my second favourite, purely because everything's been architecture, everything's been bricks and mortar and glass, and it's like actually there's some colour and some natural world in there as well. So
this is a proper less is more image, isn't it? It's just stunning.
I sat in that cornfield for probably about half an hour looking for some wheat that was just sticking its head up above the other bits of wheat.
You did take your corking scissors and cut all the tops off all the others then?
No, I didn't really fancy being chased out by a farmer and a shotgun. I'm guessing that's what happens. But yeah, this is in Warwickshire, and it's at a place called Chesterton Windmill, and it's a magnet for photographers for taking this picture of the windmill. And this night, there's a sunset, obviously. There's probably about 30, 40 photographers all aimed at the windmill, and then there's me with my back to them, sat in the cornfield just looking for this bit of wheat. I was somewhat losing it, but yeah.
Well, back to the previous statement that sometimes you've just got to look behind you, and we've got Neil. He said one of his landscape goals that he took was purely a result of turning around and looking what was behind him. So it is a well worthwhile technique is just to have a look around. Even when you go for a specific thing, is just to keep your eye out for something else. This hour has just absolutely flown past.
That's amazing.
I know, and we could probably carry on for another half an hour, but I know you've probably got a busy day and somebody that'll want your attention very shortly, no doubt. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Nick. I don't know if Becky's still there. She's not cropped up. I think. Oh yes, she's back.
Of course.
And we haven't. I don't think we've got through half. Well, we've got through quite a lot of your work. There's still a few left, but what a diversity, and what an absolute pleasure it's been. And I look forward to seeing many more of your images.
No, thanks for asking me.
That's been a pleasure.
Lovely session. Your work, Nick, is absolutely fantastic, and really, really outstanding. Your journey is really interesting too. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You are most
I can't believe we haven't actually got one question.
I know.
In the question box.
Been glued to the screens, clearly. So yes.
I thought we'd get loads of questions about how you do things and things like that, but that'd be a hour in itself, wouldn't it? Your editing techniques.
Yeah. I didn't realise how long. I know in the pre-chats you said that you spend quite a while editing your images, but as an outsider looking in, you don't tend to realise that the amount of effort and the amount of time that goes into these absolutely stunning works of art that you create.
I've got the time down, and I said that's just learning the more efficient methods. But yeah, it does take some time, definitely.
Brilliant. Always learning.
Rome wasn't built in a day, was it?
Indeed.
Very, very true.
I mean, the main point is the vision, isn't it? It's having that vision to go capture, go home and create. That's where it all starts, isn't it? When you get home. Well, the interesting bit.
Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thank you everybody for joining us and tuning in this morning. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. I hope you all have a fantastic week. The fresh week of webinars is up and live and ready to book, so please go and have a look and get booking. We've got Andrew Beck on with Gavin this time next week, whom is a wildlife photographer based in South Africa, so that's going to be pretty interesting too. So yes, please join us. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you again, Nick. Thank you again, Gavin. Fantastic session. Take care, guys, and we will see you all soon.
See you later. Bye-bye.